Welcome and thank you for joining this session about Maximo Health, Safety and Environment, also called HSE. What I'm going to be talking about in this session are how to use some of the tools that are provided within the HSE module and how I can use those to add new layers of control throughout your work management and asset management processes. So my name's Kyle Harding. I'm the Director of Product Management for Starboard Consulting. Just a brief history on me. Prior to Starboard, I had worked for the past couple of years in the Oracle Water and Energy Group, where my focus had been on building DER, Distributed Energy Resource software management tools, and really the orchestration of bringing some of those distributed energy resources onto the grid. Right, a majority of my working life had been spent working on IBM, particularly on the Maximo platform for just about 20 years. Right, I started in the early 2000s working on Maximo version 6. My focus was on the service desk product. So applications like service request, incident, problem, change, release, SLA, COM templates, which transitioned into a role as a product manager working on the Maximo HSE team and the product itself, which has been near and dear to my heart for probably the last 15 years. Right, I've long been an advocate of breaking down the silos between HSE functionality and work management and asset management business processes to unlock the value that can be discovered there. And I wrapped up my time at IBM in an innovation role where I had worked with a team that developed the Assist product, where we utilized augmented reality and AI toolkits, which part of that functionality is now part of MAS. So I know we don't have a lot of time. We have about 30 minutes, but what I'd like to do first is really just kind of think about a couple of questions, right? Just to think about from your perspective. Do you know your company's safety slogan? Do you know the safety culture and how it's implemented within your company? And do you know if the health, safety, and environment tools are integrated with your Maximo business processes? So I'm just going to start a quick poll, hopefully. I'll launch. So that poll should now be distributed. This is the first question. I'll give you a minute or two just to think about that. And then my second poll question is just around the integration of your HSE tools that you're using if it's not the Maximo HSE product, and whether or not they're integrated within your work and asset management business processes. And you might not know what the answer is, but you know, it's a piece of information that I'm interested in if you are aware of it. And we'll share that following the session. Okay, good. We're getting some good feedback here. It almost looks like a 50-50 split in terms of integration. All right, so let's just close those polls and continue with our presentation. So one of the major themes of my presentation today is just thinking about our attendees, and a majority of our attendees are working under some type of a safety statement or a safety culture commitment that their company has made. So what I did is just talking to some of the guys who were running the seminar, I just gathered some of those safety statements from the web. So Alamo Colleges was one of the companies that had signed up, and they're talking about effective tools to safely deal with potential hazards in and around their working and learning environments. So thinking about how do I identify those potential hazards and how do I address them when it comes time to execute work. Another one was from the Home Depot, right? It talks about creating a strong safety culture. How do I ingrain within my workers the need to understand the hazards that are present and be cognizant of how to address those hazards on a day-to-day, in a work order to work order, and a task-to-task type approach. Corning was another company that signed up, right? Corning talks about employing an internal safety and health management system model that incorporates hazard recognition, evaluation, and control. And that's really kind of what the focus of my presentation is. How do I use the Maximo HSE tools to implement that type of a system that's fully integrated with my work management system? The other part that I like about the Corning statement is the plan, do, check, act concept, which is kind of a big part of what Maximo enables, right, systematically. And then the final one, which kind of brings it all together, I thought was this one from Southern Water. So talking about injuries and illnesses, how can we prevent them? And prevention is really kind of the focus of where we want to be, right? Identifying situations that might be near misses and what are causing those near misses. And then developing the skills and knowledge to work in a safe and healthy way as I'm not only planning the work, but also executing the work, right? The guys out in the field turning the wrenches, and being accountable, right? So if there is a standing operating procedure that's in place, how do we ensure that we're following those standard operating procedures, or those PSSRs, right? The pre-start safety routines, or the toolbox talks that are supposed to occur before work begins, right? Again, minimizing, mitigating, prevention, and providing assets that are operating safely and are maintained in a way that allows them to operate safely. So from this small sampling, right, I would surmise that all of the companies recognize that in their operating environments, there's high levels of risk, right? And those risks have the potential to interrupt your ongoing operations and your maintenance and impact the well-being of your company, your employees, your customers, as well as your environment. So the more the thought that goes into identifying all of those potential risks and consider the likelihood of their occurrence and impact, really that's what risk assessment and risk mitigation is all about. Right? The higher the immediacy of the threat, the greater the level of planning and the effort to mitigate and avoid the impact of those risks. So I know in some of these talks that I've had, when we talk about risk, identifying risk and mitigating that risk, sometimes people aren't really sure what we're talking about. So I found actually this video, which is actually a great video that really kind of walks through the 5 steps that we typically put up on the board when we start talking about risk idea mitigation. So as I play this, right, you'll see that there's some identification and analysis of the risk that's been identified. Actually, let me play this and we'll go through that at the same time. So there's some identification here, right? And they're analyzing, how big is this risk? And the second step is reviewing the possible solutions, right? So we have some pillows that can soften the fall when I need to get off of this bed. So the little guy starts to implement the solution. He's bringing, I guess you could call it PPE, and putting it in place and implementing the solution. So as he gets that solution in place, it's going to take him a little bit of time. He is pretty small. He's going to check and then make any changes that might need to be made before he takes action. So he might make an adjustment here, making sure it's exactly where it needs to be. And now he's going to take action. He's going to finish the job, so to say. So we go back to that plan, do, check, and act, kind of those steps. And in this simple scenario, that's exactly what this little guy is doing, right? He's breaking it down and executing the task. So how does that apply to us? So when people think about Maximo, typically what comes to mind is asset maintenance and asset health and warranty tracking and PMs and work planning and scheduling. They don't necessarily think about health, safety, and environment, right? What HSE, Maximo HSE, The focus there is really on the workers who are turning the wrenches and keeping them safe as they work through the steps on a work order or operate a big piece of equipment or work at height or in a trench, or they're using PPE to stay safe. In addition to this, the worker is really the regulations that are typically in place, right? A lot of us are operating in highly regulatory and highly regulated industries where regulatory compliance is a must, right? So how do we maintain that compliance? It's kind of a second area of focus that we'll go through as part of this presentation, right? So how do we bring it together, right? So Maximo users, they're all operating in high-risk industries, right? Whether it's operational risk, environmental risk, regulatory compliance, high availability, business risk, even dynamic risk. So as work is happening and maybe multiple work orders are happening in the same area, how do I dynamically assess what's going on and adjust accordingly? So Maximo HSE provides the capability, right, to systematically identify risk and provide the mechanisms to help you manage and mitigate all types of those risks that your business is subjected to within your EAM and work management business processes. So this is just kind of a step back, because a lot of the times when we talk about Maximo HSE, internally when I worked at IBM, it was always kind of a joke that when everybody talked about industry solutions, nobody had full visibility of what Maximo HSE actually did. Right? Originally, it was delivered as part of oil and gas, and then IBM was trying to sell oil and gas into a pharmaceutical or a life sciences company. It didn't make a lot of sense. So Maximo HSE was broken out as its own add-on, and really as a marketing effort, marketed across all of the different customers in the different industries that Maximo services. Right? So HSE provides those tools to operationalize your HSE process within your EAM and work management business processes. Right? It enables you to work to plan your work consistently and identify and mitigate the risks based upon the attributes of the work that's coming in. Right? It becomes a repeatable process. So things like job plans and the relationship to PMs and risk assessment, permit to work, right, that can be driven by height or trench or heat or explosive type work. Hazard review checklists that can be used over and over again, so I'm consistently performing the same type of checks and checklists that need to be performed based upon the type of work. Safety plans that can be applied, isolations or bypasses that need to be put in place. Tracking things like toolbox talk, right? Some people call them PSSRs, regulations and compliance, maintaining and driving the necessary work to maintain that compliance, as well as incident reporting, right? So the humans, your workers who are out in the field, are really your human sensors, right? When they see something that's going on that shouldn't, how can we allow them to easily report it so it stays as a violation and a near miss versus an incident with full-blown injuries? Getting over onto the operational side, right? Things like operator log, investigations to get to root cause, as well as audit and survey capabilities are all part of HSE, right? The beauty of HSE is I can just bite off the pieces that really address my pain points. So if I really just I need to do risk assessment and I want to do incident management, I can do those and implement those unto themselves. I don't have to implement all of these all at the same time in a big bang implementation approach. The way that I've seen this work best is where I bite it off in small chunks and I have small wins and they build on each other. So for the rest of this presentation, right, my plan is to take you through a few of the different applications and use cases at a very high level, because I know we don't have a lot of time, and show you how HSE can help you provide that systematic, repeatable layer of control within your existing business processes. So the use cases I'm going to focus on are the risk assessment, permit to work, and work order tracking will be the first one. The second one will be around regulatory compliance. And then the third one will be around incident management and near miss reporting. So let's just jump into risk assessment. So this is an existing work management process where, as a work request comes in, And somebody who's doing that initial triage defines and categorizes the work. Based upon those attributes on the work, it can lead within that workflow process that a risk assessment has to be performed. And the result of that risk assessment could lead to the requirement of a permit. So first, let's just take a look at the risk assessment application. So this is kind of a multi-tab presentation of the risk assessment. Some of these screenshots are probably a little bit older, but they're still applicable. You know, as we move into Mass 8, the attributes and the objects behind the attributes are all the same. The presentation might look a little bit different, but as you can see here, it's a multi-tab presentation. I can capture type and category. I can assign some ownership. There's some approvals here. You know, I can do things like use some template functionality. So if I'm performing the same types of work and risk assessments over and over again, I can capture a risk assessment and all of the characteristics and steps that need to be performed as part of the template. So if I'm, you know, I'm doing work at height, you know, multiple times a day, then I might have a template that captures all of the questionnaires and the checklists that need to be performed for work that's being performed at height. So just going through a couple of these tabs, one of the tabs that I like to highlight is this hazard review, right? So in this example, right, we're using a JSA, a job safety analysis format approach and set of questions, right, that define and control the hazards of the process, the job, and the procedures in a systematic way, where I can examine and document every task within the job and identify at the task level the hazards and how to control them at that task level. So each task could have a score, a safety score, or a risk score, and that can really drive the overall risk of the work itself or of the risk assessment. In addition, right, to that hazard review, you can see we have a full review and approval process on that tab, other checklists, other environmental risks that can be identified, the team that's actually performing the assessment, and then any related records. So as this risk assessment is being performed as part of that work order, you'll see not only on the risk assessment do I have that relationship, right, that the Maximo framework creates and then maintains for me, but it's also present over on the work order itself. So moving from the risk assessment, right, based upon the outcome of that risk assessment, it leads to a permit being required. So permit to work is one of the major applications that, or I shouldn't say major applications, but it's one of the applications that HSE provides, where a request for permit could be generated, preparing the permit, reviewing the permit, implementing all of the mitigations and controls related to the work that's being performed, and then a full-blown issue and acceptance process can be implemented. So just to give you a feel for what the permit to work application looks like, is again, it's a multi-tab application. You can see some of the ownership capabilities, the status, when is it valid, the required dates, you know, the working hours that it's related to, any units or other details that might be captured as part of the permitting. Also, the hazards and isolations that might be put in place in relation to this permit. So if this was hot work, you know, I might need to isolate the area where I'm performing the hot work in case if there was, let's say, some gas running through the room that I'm working in. Right, I can put those isolations in place. I can bring in any other hazards that are identified as part of the risk assessment. If there's any gas testing that had to happen or conditions for work, or any other hazardous materials that might be in the area. The other neat thing we talked a little bit about was the toolbox talk. So quite often, you know, regulatory compliance wise is the need to track any of the compliance capabilities for compliance purposes of any toolbox talk that happened. And so the toolbox talk is where the crew lead talks to the guys who are going out or the gals that are going out to perform the work, kind of identifies all of the risks that are going to be there. There might be some dynamic risks that could also be identified. So in this case, that crew lead can document everything that was covered, can document who was present for that toolbox talk. And then the final work is the permit itself. So if I needed a physical permit to hang on a work site, Maximo provides that permit report format where I can quickly generate that permit file. And then finally, over on the work order side. So when I actually generate the work or I'm planning that work, right, I see there's an association to the risk assessment, right, that was completed as part of the work planning process. So the work planner can go back and look at that risk assessment document and see any of those details that were captured. I also capture any permitting, right? So on the related records tab of the work order application that's provided as part of HSE, right, I see those relationships to those permits and some of the kind of the top level details, right? With all of the controls that you're familiar with as part of Maximo. So I can open the details, right? I could see, use the down caret to open those details, and there's a go-to that's also available, so I can go directly to the permit from the work order itself. So the next one is regulatory compliance. Excuse me. So like we had said earlier, a lot of the customers that we've been dealing with are operating in highly regulated environments. So the first thing that we might want to do is use some of the import capabilities to import the regulations that are pertinent to me. Right? Which regulations do I need to be cognizant of, and what do I need to do to maintain my compliance? So I can import those regs. I can assign ownership to those regs. I can, associate an expiration date that might trigger some type of a review. Right? I could have an escalation that goes out and looks at my regs. I can use a COM template to automatically send to the owner of this particular regulation, a notice that 30 days prior to its expiration, I need you to go out and make sure we're maintaining our currency with the regs, that we have the latest and greatest. And that might be a task that's assigned to them. The second part that we can do as part of this use case is we can associate regulations throughout Maximo. So if we look at the Where Used tab, you can see regs can be associated to assets, locations, job plans, hazards, permit and certificate types, operating policies. Where I'm interested as part of this use case is really around PMs. Right? So if I'm looking at the details of a regulation and it tells me every 60 days I need to go out and perform a certain type of inspection, well, I can associate that particular regulation to a PM, right, to a preventative maintenance work order. And then I can use the PM Gen capability to generate those work orders on the schedule that's been specified by the regulation. Right? When I do that, I generate the work order, the regulation is pushed to the work order, and then I can create a simple query that's going to go out and find all of the work orders that have the relationship to the regulation. And not only can I prove compliance to an auditor who might show up, but I also can track my compliance costs very easily by using standard work order functionality within Maximo. And the last use case I want to talk to is really incident reporting, right? And the whole purpose of incident reporting is really to encourage kind of that safety culture, right? It's okay to capture, a safety observation or a hazard report, because really what's being captured are near misses. And the more near misses I capture, the more incidents with full-blown injuries that become OSHA events I can avoid. Right, so there's a couple of tools that have been provided as part of Maximo HSE that I think add a lot of value. So in 761, the mobile incident reporter was introduced, and I know it hasn't been upgraded in the MAS framework yet. I know it's on their roadmap for upgrade, but I still think it's worth talking about. Right, it really enables that. I know I've said this a couple of times. Really, the human sensor, right, and it gives them the capability to use a device, right, a smart device, a phone, to observe and report what they see, again, to capture near misses before they become full-blown incidents, right? And you couple that, there's a corrective action application. where I can create a set of corrective actions that address the root cause for those near misses. Right? The other part that incident reporter can be used for is really the front end to your OSHA 300, 300A, and 301 reporting process, right? So those formats, those reporting formats, are provided as part of Maximo HSE, and within the tool set, within incidents, we capture all of the necessary data points to generate those OSHA reports. But just to jump into the incident reporter itself, it's really a simplified application that captures these 4 pieces of information, right? What happened, where did it happen, who was involved, and what did you do about it? Captures safety observations, hazard reports, injuries with illness, any accident details that might be observed. So in this case, right, this is just showing some of the screenshots where the user opens the incident application, clicks on create a new incident, and they capture what happened. Right? In each of these fields, I can use the voice to text capability of the device, and then each of the category and type fields are coming down from the Maximo implementation. So all of the lists are fully configurable, and once they're configured over on the Maximo, in the Maximo instance, they're pushed down to the device the next time that device logs in. A few capabilities, right, within the application. I can grab pictures from the gallery. I can take photos. You see here, I'm taking a photo, and then I'm going to use the photo as part of my incident report. Additionally, right, if I'm standing in front of what I'm reporting, I can capture the GPS coordinates of my device, and those are also reported as part of that incident that's coming into Maximo. The other piece that's a nice kind of validation with a lot of our utility customers, right? They're using barcodes and QR codes. So the application has that barcode reading capability where when I read the barcode, it's going to look up the location or the asset information and automatically bring it into the app. The second part was who was involved. So I can capture as many people who were involved as part of what I was observing. I can capture name, phone, email, and person role, right? The role is configurable out of the box. IBM provides somebody who is injured or ill. They were the primary cause, the secondary cause, or they were a witness, right? We do some validation, right? But we also allow, or IBM also allows for capturing of people who aren't necessarily within the Maximo database. The next section is, what did you do about it? What actions did you take? Did you report it to an authority? Did you put a temporary solution in place? And again, it's a value list that's completely configurable, but it's really just providing some information to the person who's doing that initial triage to indicate whether you did anything or not in relation to what you were reporting. And then finally, this is just kind of the Power App. So when that incident is being reported from the field, this is how it might show up in a configured start center. Right, so I have a section here where I'm capturing major leak incidents. And when I open those details, you can see all of those details that were provided on the mobile application begin to populate the incident in the Power App itself. I know we're getting short on time. What I wanted to make sure that you're aware of is the full footprint of Maximo HSE 762. Right, so this is a nice chart that IBM has provided to us where it kind of walks through all of the major business processes that are supported, and then each of the details within that process. So if I look at the details, those are really, I would call them applications that would be within a module. And the ones that are highlighted here are the ones that we've talked about today. And what I want to make sure is clear is, you know, these are all, you can implement these one at a time to address your major pain points. And, you know, don't be scared off by the breadth of the functionality that's provided, but embrace what it can do for you in bringing together your HSE, some of your HSE functions to your work management functions. And finally, I know I haven't really left any time to address any questions that there might be, but I want to make you aware that tomorrow at 3:40, we're hosting a breakout room. It's kind of like if you went in person to one of the shows, one of the user groups. It's like coming up to our table and talking to us. So if you have interest in diving deeper on any of these or asking specific questions, please note this on your calendar and come to our breakout room tomorrow, and I'd be more than happy to dive deeper on any of these subjects. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to talking to you further.
Thank you, Kyle. Good stuff.
Cool, cool.
We'll see everybody in the next session. Thanks.